For those of you who do not know me, I am Amanda Verhoff, and I've been with ALSD for a long time, 15, 16 years. And it has been my pleasure to get to know the 5 hospitality gurus who will take us through differentiating premium hospitality here momentarily. Before we get started, though, I do want to go over a couple of housekeeping notes as well as announcements. So a lot of you know the ALSD Conference and Trade Show and Design and Build Forum, a new technology track, will be taking place this July 10 to 12 in New York City. Yes, fist raised by Erica there, we agree. For all you OGs, we are hosting at the same hotel we did in 2010. So we will be at the Marriott Marquis Times Square. Excited to welcome you all. If you haven't seen a couple of the cool announcements that we have made so far, I'll rattle off a couple. So we will go to probably 3 or 4 venues, and 2 of those have been announced so far. Barclays on Sunday night and UBS Arena on Monday. So hopefully we're staying tuned, fingers crossed, for a Tuesday announcement coming up. We've got our visionary already announced in Mark Faber, and we're cooking up some keynotes and some other fun education. So stay tuned, and please be aware that if you do intend to join us in New York and you haven't signed up yet, there is a winter early bird going on that ends next Wednesday, March 16th. So if you want to save you and your team a couple $100, go ahead and hit me on email, amanda@alsd.com or alsd.com/register. So we will talk about more fun topics like the one we're going to talk about today at the conference. So hopefully we'll see y'all there. So without further ado, I would like to get into a couple more housekeeping notes and also how we're going to facilitate today's webinar. So to start from a high level, we have talked to members year over year, and coming out of COVID, there were 3 topics that really kept bubbling up to the surface consistently. 1 is staffing, of course. 2 is technology, which we will study with Jessica Gaffney running our technology division now. And 3, differentiating the premium experience, which is what today's roundtable will get into the weeds on. So we're excited to talk about that. As we talk about it, I do want to make note that we did cast our roundtable/webinar net pretty wide today. So we probably have teams and venues attending, agencies, sport management professors, vendors and suppliers, consultants, might even have a suite holder or 2 in the virtual room today. So I think this is going to be a really robust discussion. And if you learned some things today, great. If you have more questions, please send those to us, because we do certainly want to continue this discussion at the conference in New York. So again, thank you to those who have joined today. Another matter of housekeeping is we do have another ALSD counterpart. Jessica is in the back room just in case my internet goes out, which we hope doesn't happen, but she will take over if need be. And what's going to happen here momentarily is each speaker is going to get about 30 to 60 seconds to, of course, tell us who they are and what they do. But more importantly, and probably philosophically, is they're going to answer what is premium, what is luxury, and are they the same? And the hint there, a little carrot, is no, probably not. I think our speakers are going to come at this from different angles and with different opinions about this topic today. On the roundtable today, we'll also talk about differentiating premium by real estate, and also we'll talk about customer service versus hospitality. And if they're one and the same, answer they're not. We'll talk about our premium audience, our new demographics that are buying and using premium. We'll also talk about that shift in wealth and how people are using premium these days. We will definitely talk about specific ways to differentiate the premium experience and what we're seeing our teams and venues do to get creative. And finally, as you've heard me use premium and luxury rather interchangeably, we will discuss here if there's a discernible difference between the 2. So I'm excited to get this going. And as I said, the introductions will happen first. And we will start with Erica, whose last name I'm not going to try to pronounce because she knows I will totally butcher it, but she's going to tell us who she is, what she does, and her take on premium, luxury, and if they're the same. So Erica, unmute yourself and tell us all those.
All right, thank you, Amanda, and thank you for not attempting my last name. It's a lot easier than it looks. I'm Erica Muhlenbruch. I am actually the director of the Sport Performance and Entertainment Studio at Burns & McDonnell, which is probably a new name to a lot of the faces and the market that we're talking about. We're actually an integrated delivery firm where we do architecture, interior design, engineering, and construction. So we're bringing this model to sports, and it's really exciting because I have been an interior architect for 20 plus years. The first half of my career was actually spent more on the hospitality design, working on theaters, restaurants, a little bit of hotel, things like that, along with some corporate spaces, and switched over to the sports side 10, 12, 15 years ago. And so this discussion actually really excites me because I've always brought the idea of a hospitality-minded subset to the design of sports spaces. And I absolutely love this topic because to me, premium and luxury are two totally different things. I think premium has been so used in the space that it's, sorry to say this, it's a little bit meaningless at this point, because premium, as to what we've known it for the majority of time in stadiums, venues, arenas, is something that's really expected by, I think, a lot of people these days. It's, when you think of premium, it's somewhat based on location, but I think it's also accessibility, ease of use, responding to demands, whereas luxury takes all of those, but I think it's that next level, design of which is only a part of it. You know, it's a little bit more tailored, bespoke, it's individualized. Scarcity is always a big part of it as well. Location, you know, we've been seeing that 50-yard line, center court, center pitch, you pick the sport, you pick the center stage, whatever it may be, has always been the key spot. But now I think evolving fans are really expecting a lot more than that. So I'm interested to get into what that really means as we move forward. So with that, I'm going to table that because I think that there's a lot to cover today.
Well, and I think Peter's going to take the mic from you and continue with that thought. Peter, tell us who you are, what you do, and all about premium and luxury.
Thanks, Amanda. Peter Sorkoff. I'm the CEO and managing partner of a consultancy firm called SEER in Atlanta. And in a nutshell, we take behavioral economics, moral psychology or moral foundation theory, and the study of fandom and roll those things together as a unique insight to building a business strategy, in particular in sports, but across other industries as well. I say particularly in sports because I spent the first 25 plus years of my career in pro sports. So even though we're in other spaces now, it's sort of our origin story. As far as luxury and premium goes, I would agree with Erica. I think there's a very distinct difference between the two. I think sports is just kind of coming to that personally. If the teams that we work with, the previous model in my mind has been very binary, sort of all in general or all in premium. And I think that, you know, some teams are starting to embrace changing that for a variety of different reasons. Part of it is to keep up to customer tastes and what their expectations are. And I think part of it too is because the business requires it. I think, you know, when you're looking at the cost of stadiums today, what franchise values are, and sort of the financial model behind all of that, teams need a new way to sort of drive or maximize or optimize their ticket yield. And you really only get to do that en masse when you sort of open a new stadium or arena, where you get to kind of reset the market. But I think that as you're seeing teams move away from this very binary approach to luxury or premium, it's another way to be able to really reset the market's expectations for value and what things are worth. As far as what I think the difference between premium and luxury are, luxury to me, like Erica said, is scarce, but I think it's also artful. If you look outside of sports and in just the luxury industry in general, it's very artful. And the last thing that I think kind of gets lost a little bit, and you touched on it when you mentioned technology, Amanda, typically luxury is very innovative. Because if you sort of look at adoption curves, luxury lives where there's not a lot of scale at the front of the curve, and it's sort of making what the new sort of, you know, idea of extreme value is. And then it kind of starts to move through that adoption curve and starts to turn into premium, and then eventually actually turns into general market. And there's lots of great examples of that in automotive and airline and all kinds of other industries. But like I said, I think sports is just kind of coming to that game now.
Yeah, we'll get to those other industries, and we have a couple panelists that actually study, along with yourself, other industries, which we'll talk about later. I'd like to go next to Kathy Burrows, please.
Hi, I'm Kathy Burrows, and I am the Chief Innovation and Energy Officer for Sold Out Seating. And I work with teams really to come up with new ideas and to think forward instead of backward, which is a really important in today's world, especially. We tend to be stuck in 1992 in a lot of ways instead of looking forward and what we could be doing. Difference for me between premium and luxury is just that. Premium has been more or less, premium and luxury have been kind of lumped together for a long time in what we thought was a premium experience, and experience is a different thing to every single person. So you can't just say we're giving you this premium experience that's a luxury setting necessarily, because it has been the same in many instances. With the innovations, and to Peter's point, a lot of new facilities have opened, but a lot of facilities are actually remodeling now too. And as they remodel, it's a question of what are we remodeling to? Premium to me is more what is the now and what is the premium experience that people expect. According to Erica, I totally agree. I did a study during COVID with a lot of different areas. One of the areas I did a study on was what is the premium experience to you? What is expected to you? And what I found was, to most people, that premium experience, just like Erica said, is expected by people. They expect to come to a game. They expect to come to a venue, and they expect certain things. And that's the premium experience they're now expecting. Luxury, on the other hand, is what other people can't have. Luxury is what you want to have, you wish you had, everyone wishes they had, but a select group can have. It is more of a limit on the sales. It's a limited group that can have this luxury setting. And so to me, premium right now is in the 20s. 2022 is happening and being redefined. Luxury is looking towards what we're going to in 2030. And how can we define that and continually stay ahead of the curve on that luxury end? Being ahead of what is the latest trend, the latest that might come out. And that's what that luxury setting wants versus what the premium is already getting.
Wow, thank you. I'm seeing some trends here, which I think will probably get a little bit deeper as we ask more questions. But right now I'd like to turn it over to Josh to introduce himself, please.
Thank you, Amanda. Really great to be here. Really looking forward to chatting with all of you today. So my name is Josh Liebman. I am with Roller Software. I'm the guest experience evangelist for Roller. Roller is a software company focusing on point of sale and booking within the attractions and recreation and leisure industries. So we work with amusement venues, we work with water parks, we work with family entertainment centers, trampoline parks, really anything that is a ticketed based attraction. And what we like to do is really use technology to remove a lot of the friction from the guest experience and a lot of compulsory components of the guest's visit that ultimately enhances the experience and allows the staff to deliver those wow, phenomenal, and premium experiences. As the guest experience evangelist, I get to do exciting things like this panel today. I also host the guest experience show for Roller, where I've had Amanda on as a guest, and I've had Simon on as a guest, and also just producing a lot of content, speaking at trade shows. I've been in the hospitality, tourism, and attractions industry for close to 17 years. So I've worked for Disney, I've worked for Universal, I have consulted for organizations like Ritz-Carlton, Four Seasons, worked with Coca-Cola, as well as several luxury and premium brands, as well as many attractions of various scopes and sizes. So zoos, museums, aquariums, amusement venues, things like that. To get to the question as far as the difference between luxury and premium, the way I see it, particularly as it relates to my side of the industry, is I believe that luxury is defined by how it is compared to the alternatives, whereas premium is defined by how it is compared to the internal baseline. So if you think of luxury, you're thinking of perhaps in hospitality, you might think of Ritz-Carlton associated with luxury, whereas Holiday Inn associated with more value-driven consumers. You might think of a small regional amusement park as something that caters to the value-driven consumer, whereas Disney is becoming more and more luxury. At least their pricing is dictating that more and more each day. You can create premium experiences within luxury venues, or within value-driven venues. You can book a suite at Ritz-Carlton, and that is premium compared to a standard guest room at a luxury property. You can also book a suite at a Holiday Inn, which is considered premium to a standard guest room. I think the biggest thing that they have in common with each other is that they are both determined by the guest's perception. The perception of the guest is what's going to determine, is this premium, is this luxury? And that's going to vary based on one guest to another. And that is completely based off the expectation that is being set before they walk in your doors or walk into your venue, based on a number of different factors. Perhaps they've visited before and they know what to expect. Perhaps they read about it on TripAdvisor or on online reviews, or otherwise heard about it from friends and family, saw the advertising, whatever it is that goes into that expectation, and then compared with the reality of the experience that they encountered and ultimately that they perceived to determine, was this the premium experience that the venue offered, or did I expect more? And then same thing, is this the luxury experience that I expected? Maybe I've stayed at a similar hotel, maybe I've visited a similar type of property, and I got more compared to what I got staying at this or visiting this venue or this property. Or of course, there's the flip side of it, saying, no, this, I was expecting it to be baseline. It turned out to be premium based off of my expectations that came in. So luxury being very much based on the alternatives, based on the comparable types of opportunities that the guest can do instead, whereas premium is built within that is alternative to the other options that they have within visiting the same venue.
Man, y'all are a lot smarter than I am. I'll give a nod to Disney and Chip here. My version of luxury is having my husband plan our Christmas Disney trip from A to Z, which he did to a T. It was the most turnkey trip I've ever been on, and it was luxury because he planned it all for me and my family. My kids had a hell of a time. Last but not least, Simon.
Hi, my name is Simon Nash. I'm the GM and owner of Ohana Towels, and we supply products that help businesses create a kind of more meaningful experience, a more heightened level of warmth and feeling in their on-site experience for guests. In those venues, we found typically that the goal is not customer service, but it's a goal beyond that, and that is hospitality, to show those guests, visitors, not being customers, but as guests, to show them a feeling of warmth, a feeling of caring, a feeling of inclusivity, a feeling that they walk away saying, wow, they treated me like family. And our products are a vehicle to support this kind of more friendlier and more personable and more inclusive welcome. Regarding the definitions of premium and luxury, I have premium as sort of having two elements to it, and luxury having just the one. If you go to the dictionary of the word premium, there are a couple, well, actually there are quite a few, but it says of exceptional quality or greater value than others of its kind. It also says a value in excess of that normally or usually expected. So there were points made here by Josh and Erica around that, idea of what's expected of the facility when you're arriving. Now, starting with premium then, and you look at it as essentially having two parts. One is there is a rationality to it, and one is that there is a subjectivity to it. Now, both of them turn around that word value, and it's correlated with what are you getting for the money that you pay. From the brand side, it's what are they giving at a certain price point. So can they afford leather seats at that point? No, well, we're going to go to vinyl seats instead for that category at that price point. And that may be determined on what they can afford in terms of their financials, what's the cost of goods sold, what's the profit margin that they're wanting, etc. but it is them making a decision. This is the value that we can provide at that price point. It may also then be based on, well, we want to be at a higher price point. Is there a space in the market as we consider our competitors, as we consider what people are wanting? Is there a space that we can carve out to our own as to say, this is what we stand for? And in order to do that, we have to provide a certain level of product. Again, the leather seats, the air conditioning, the wind-up windows, as the example was used, free internet in the hotel, etc. Although that's a different point at the moment. But it is, we have established that this is where we want to be in the category. And consequently, then our ads, our mission statement, our projection that we have out in our PR team is, this is what we stand for. And that's going to be an important point coming down the path. The second part then on the premium is, okay, that's nice. You think that leather seats deserve this value, this price, or are giving this value, they are at this price. It's going to come back to the customer ultimately, or the guest ultimately deciding if it's really worth it. Am I getting the value out of it that it is costing me? And so that is a very rational piece to it. It's a decision on what is the price, what is the quality, and is there an equation or an equality to that that makes it for me worthwhile buying now and more importantly buying into the future. So it's very much a value proposition, and then the customer saying, is it worth it? And there's the subjectivity part to it. Yes, it's rational. This is what we can afford. This is what this level stands for, the goods that you get. And then the subjective part, the customer saying, not worth it, or wow, that is what I'm looking for and I'm happy to pay for it at that price. Luxury is only subjective. And what's interesting, if you look at some of the definitions of the derivative of the word luxury, there are words related to it: excess, extravagance, excessive, abundance, even sensuous or sumptuous. And those are all words that sound very voluptuous, very over the top, very extravagant, but they're all one person's opinion. What do you consider extravagant? What do I consider extravagant? Hey, I usually take the bus to work, but today I went for it. I took a taxi. That to me is luxury. I never get to do that. And today I did. I went all out. When I go out for ice cream, I ask for sprinkles and some whipped cream on the top. Oh boy, that is luxury. And so here we have a problem instantly, because we've seen that luxury varies across wide categories. Yeah, I take a chauffeur. In the last example, I take a chauffeur. Yeah, I took a Mercedes. That was pretty nice. I took a Hyundai Genesis. Wow, that's a nice vehicle. No way. I took a Rolls Royce. That is luxury. Well, we've gone from ice cream sprinkles to a Rolls Royce. And for that guest using that, to them, that is the definition of luxury.
Simon, thank you. Very colorful examples that you gave there. We really appreciate it. Let's stay on kind of levels of premium. That could lead us to levels of luxury. And so I'm going to go to Peter for this one. And before you start, Peter, thank you so much for everybody for your introductions. We've got roughly a half hour here now to get into some questions more deeply. And so, as I said, Peter, love for you to explain in your words levels of premium.
Yeah, thanks, Amanda. Again, I think a lot of this can be subjective based on your business and your customers and what you have to sell. But I think maybe one of the things that gets lost, and I'm going to be maybe a little counter to some of the other panelists on this, we could certainly debate that sprinkles are a luxury, and I'm not saying that they're not. But I think when sprinkles are available to everybody, that really, in my mind, disqualifies them as a luxury. Because luxury in the goods space is really, and it's been said, it's about scarcity. And I really like where Josh was headed, because I think he's right. A lot of this has to do with creating contrast. And, I can tell you there's a team that we're working with right now that's looking at sort of all of their premium spaces. And they asked me a question the other day, should their entry level club be all inclusive? And my immediate answer, they didn't even finish the sentence, was no. And so the CEO looked over at me and said, like, wow, that was fast. And I said, well, this is a really, really easy question. And he said, how is that easy? And I said, well, you'll have no contrast with your food story between 3 levels of club that essentially go from $189 per game per ticket to $590. So you can say one club has shrimp and the other one doesn't, but at that point, that's not enough to contrast basically $400 per game in difference. I think that, the other thing that's interesting to me on the team side, and this is a little off of your question, but hopefully it kind of circles back around, Amanda. I think, and Kathy and I talked a little bit about this earlier, teams are really prone to always talking about price as the single currency or metric for value. And I think that that's a major mistake today, because I don't think that consumers in the luxury space do that. If you're in the luxury world, price sensitivity is not really a factor. And especially if you have more money than time. And so, to me, luxury is really driven by the contrast to scarcity. And so how you offset luxury from premium, by sort of definition, has this cascading effect of then what general market looks like. So if you don't set the top of the market, then you really haven't set the bottom of the market. And when you then get into trying to apply pricing strategies to that, the whole thing can really sort of fall apart. So I think when you architecturally start to look at this, and I'm sort of thinking of Erica, it's one part sort of how spaces look. It's another part how those spaces act. And then I think what you really see with teams who have sort of really kind of like gotten on board with this and are, this is a terrible word, but are properly exploiting this. They've also layered into this things like access. And so again, if you let everybody at an NBA team get access to the floor, then the floor is just not that valuable anymore. But if you maintain the floor as this sort of like sacred ground that is very, very unique for anybody to actually get their feet on wood, right? Then how you're able to price floor level seats, and let's say, a club amenity that has access to those floor level seats becomes what I think somebody else said earlier, which is very aspirational for everybody downstream in that product array. So to me, contrast is absolutely pivotal. And I think, Simon did a really nice job of sort of talking about the automotive industry where, yeah, there was a time, and I'm old, I'll claim it, where, power windows were like, that was a luxury option. But in a world where we're sort of living in an experiential based economy right now, everybody's trying to deliver some form of experience everywhere. And so how you actually sort of break that experience up and then fortify it with physical spaces and design of physical spaces, I think is really, really critical to the formula or the criteria that you use to, again, create that contrasting.
So something that you hit on in your answer was demographics, and that's what I want to stay on. I want to shift to understanding who our premium seat clients are or might be in the future. And so, Erica, to you, Burns and McDonnell recently published an article indicating that American wealth is on the move. Baby boomer generation expected to soon transfer what I'm reading as 30 trillion in wealth to younger generations, which is astonishing. So with that, what does the new luxury owner or luxury buyer look like?
That's a really good question. And it is really fascinating to see that large number, 30 trillion. It's difficult for us to get our head wrapped around. I think the new luxury buyer right now, I would be one of the, as far as an age range, one of the current luxury buyers. I'm sort of on the cusp of Gen X to millennial, but we talk so much about the next buyer being the millennials. And I think that that's good to discuss because that's more of a short-sighted piece. You know, even the millennials are up to 40 years old now. So it's really looking at the Gen Z and beyond, because they're the ones that are going to inherit a lot of this wealth and continue to grow on that. And thinking about them for future proofing. You could never truly future proof, but the idea of really looking forward, I think looking at Gen Z now and how they were raised, they've always had technology. They're a very social group. You know, it's a lot. It's just as important what happens on social media when discussing a game, a concert, whatever you're at a venue to attend, as it is to actually be there in person. And so we've been doing a lot of thought studies and practical applications of how do you make these spaces really flexible for these buyers who are going to expect the idea of technology being seamlessly integrated. I mean, that's a given of what people are expecting now, but I think, as Peter had mentioned before, in all honesty, the sports as a whole are really still behind in terms of what technology can deliver to this point. And you're seeing it start to be incorporated more in newer venues. Older venues being renovated are always a challenge, but the new buyers are going to really want to, I think you'll have two. You'll have kind of the shift of the current buyers that maybe focus on privacy when they're talking about luxury and premium and what that means. And I see the future buyers, the Gen Z and beyond, really wanting to be more social and visible in their wealth. And because let's be honest, when we're talking about luxury, we're talking a little bit about wealth. It's ease of use. It's responding to demands that they don't know that they have yet. It's knowing. It's a dossier on your luxury client that's attending an event, right? Or your fan that's attending. But it's the idea of these new buyers that are really expecting things to come up them instantaneously. And really our venues need to respond to that. And we've been so architecturally, traditionally everything's been so static. You know, let's use a suite as an example. You design a suite once, it stays that way. If you're lucky, you'll renovate it in 10 years, maybe 20. But everything's so quickly evolving that I think our next level of premium buyer will be expecting not only the ability to move about in our venues, each event that they attend, they'll want a different perspective. But I think the spaces themselves need to be able to rapidly evolve. And I'm going to use suites as an example. We've been doing a lot of thought study on, are they almost modular? You know, because to Josh's point earlier, even the level of expected premium and luxury is a little subjective per person. I think that you could easily set bars, as Peter was talking about. The idea of sprinkles might be somebody's luxury, but probably not really luxury. You know, luxury is buying a $50,000 watch versus a $500 Apple Watch that Peter may get into in a little bit. To me, the $500 watch may be a luxury, but really it's a premium. And so I think as we're looking at these new buyers, the ability to respond to that ever evolving, ever changing, technology heavy, sustainably minded, I would even say, premium buyer will be really, really interesting to focus on. You know, they're looking at things that are evolving with trends. So again, I think from a built environment, looking at things that are more fixed is just an old way of thinking, and we need to think more flexible and evolutionary and a little bit tactile in even how we handle things. In addition to technology, the service is key, the food is key, how we ticket it and market it, and location is key. If that kind of wraps up, I think, what that next buyer will be looking for.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Kathy,
Amanda, can I just add something to that
please.
real quick? I think because there's some great work that's out there right now, and it's tricky because I think a lot of people are focused on who's buying, who has the money to buy luxury today. Who I think that group looks very different than the group that Erica is talking about. And there's a couple interesting factors that are happening at a global level that's actually shifting sort of the view of luxury with younger audiences. And I'm just going to sort of throw them out really quickly because I don't think that these are uncommon to the rest of the panelists. But one is the fall from grace of billionaires. Right. So we sort of saw Bezos, you know, spent a couple $1 billion going to the moon. And a lot of people were really pissed off because the money he could have spent going to the moon would have fed the world over twice for 3 months. Right. And so, I think Simon's point was dead on. When you kind of look at what adjectives were previously associated with luxury, this newer emerging generation sees those things as grotesque, because we're also in this very sort of interesting time where globally we're sort of getting a social conscience that we hadn't previously. And, another one of that Erica touched on, big factors is, we have a planet in crisis. And so from a consumption perspective, that's really sort of changed the game in terms of how people are looking at the materiality of luxury as well. And as it relates to, wait a minute, that's a tree that came from the rainforest. I don't want to buy that thing made of that wood, right? Or so on and so forth. And then the last big one that I think the pandemic has really sort of accelerated, it was there previously, is this sort of openness now around mental health and physical health that was previously kind of like just an undercurrent that wasn't really talked about. And so you're seeing the notion of wellness and the idea of individual wellness really start to, I think, permeate the luxury definition for this younger generation. And those things as it relates to their sense of identity. And so that has a lot to do with, I'm not what I own. I am who I am, right? So don't judge me by the things that I own and the stuff that I wear and the brands that I'm, are associated in my life. I need you to see me for who I am and what I believe in. So that's a very, very sort of a tectonic change from our generation. If I'm just kind of looking around on this call, maybe Josh and Erica are a little further down, and you too, Amanda, but for sure, Simon and I are the two old guys on this call. So I'll stop with that. But I think those are important factors when teams are thinking about what is that next generation actually considering in the totality of how they're sort of formulating their idea of luxury.
Simon, you raised your hand.
Yes, I did. Yes, I was just going to sort of bring up that point again around maybe my sprinkles. I still like those. That's the idea that it's going back to, you and I say that's not of any luxury, but to that person, it absolutely is. They never get to buy that. They're just this one special day. To them, it's something that they never have. And now they have a chance to do so. It's yes, perhaps more than they can afford, but in this particular case, yes, it's expensive for no good reason. And it reinforces that point that price doesn't determine luxury. It's a subjective point around the pleasure of the senses. And so for them, at that moment, the pleasure of the senses is that extra feeling. It's for that price, yes, the luxury item is going to be more expensive, but it doesn't always have the best features. It's got something that perhaps not everybody can get. It comes back to that word we've used in a couple of times, scarcity, scarcity, scarcity. Yes, in some ways that's looking at it from the supplier side, but how about from the buyer side, saying, as you just said there, Peter, overindulgence is gaudy to the new generation. So now actually, as you're saying, you're looking at it, what are they thinking about it? And what are they determining as something that is a pleasure of the senses and fits that word or that definition of luxury? So again, we sort of bounce back and forth between, yes, what are we providing them? What do we think is luxury to give them? But we have to remember that it's still them ultimately making the decision of if that's something that they never get to do and are going to use this time.
And to sum it up, luxury is subjective. It's the buyer's perception of it. And if we don't know all of our buyers, then we don't know what luxury means to each one of them. And I think now with a leased model becoming slightly less common, you can cast that net wider and you can bring in somebody who only gets to attend and sit in a suite once in a lifetime, right? That is luxury to them. What does that look like versus a client who has it on a 10-year lease? And that's what's expected and what's delivered. So I think it's very subjective. I think that word has been used a lot on this call. And a question from the audience was, can teams deliver the luxury experience now, and what changes are needed? Boy, is that a loaded question with what we just said. If it's so subjective, how can we deliver luxury now? It's going to change for every single client that's coming in our building from what I'm hearing from you guys. Does anybody want to respond to that? How can we deliver luxury now? What does that mean? And Peter, let's go to you, and then I want to shift it to the buying experience as well, because I know Kathy and Josh have some things to say about that. But Peter, you first.
Yeah, I just, again, and maybe this helps to clarify my point on this, and not to keep beating up sprinkles, right? Sprinkles are a luxury to that person, but that person is a general market buyer. They're not a luxury buyer. So it is a luxury to them, right? And I'm not arguing that, because I think that's absolutely true. But if we're putting them on sort of a buying continuum, they're not a luxury buyer if getting sprinkles is a luxury. So I think that's where this gets a little bit, sort of confusing. But if we're looking at this in the context of, let's say, a product array in a stadium, it's not the person who goes to a suite once in their lifetime who is a luxury buyer. They just got to sort of take part in that. The person who buys the suite is in fact the luxury buyer. And I think teams can deliver on this, but I think this is very tricky for teams because when they're building new stadiums and there is OpEx dollars, this stuff makes a lot of sense, right? The problem is, I think when you build a space like this, luxury requires ongoing maintenance that a lot of teams are not willing to put the OpEx budget into. So the CapEx, yes, I'll build it out, right? You're going to go see USB Stadium Arena in Long Island. It's going to be absolutely amazing. But 7 years from now, if they don't keep their luxury spaces up in terms of elevating with what's changing, in sort of luxury expectations with that very narrow buying group, it's not going to seem like a luxury amenity anymore. It's going to seem dated and feel premium. So this is the danger, I think, with like real luxury when we're talking about a buying audience. There is an expectation that you have to keep up.
And I want to shift from that in a minute, because I think that Josh is going to bring up a couple points of how we keep up with other industries as well. But first, I do want to go to Kathy. And it's important to note that the overall experience starts with the purchase experience. And to Erica's earlier point, they are all about technology. They want to buy more simply. Josh said it earlier too, the frictionless. So Kathy, what are you hearing about the new demographic, how they want to buy, and the requests that are being made outside of business hours? They're not just buying, between 9 and 5. So technology is a big piece to this. And you've likely heard from a lot of the teams about how these younger demographic is buying. Kathy, what do you say to that?
Right. And just before I go into that, Peter is absolutely right. If we're looking to 2030 with our luxury, and then as we progress into 25, 26, we start looking to 2040, we're going to stay ahead of the game as to what luxury wants versus there, I did it, I'm done. And 10 years from now what am I doing? But to get on to who's buying and how they're buying, one thing I found, again, during the pandemic, I called a ton of businesses across the country, and I asked them why we're selling wrong to them, why we can't get the business sales that we're looking for, what are we doing incorrectly? And it came through loud and clear. First of all, the decision maker is younger now. The decision maker is not the 65, 60-year-old. They grew up with sports and that's what you were supposed to do. And it was the good old boys club. Decision makers now, believe it or not, are 35 to 50. And with that age range, more of them are looking for a more unique experience and an easier way to purchase and at their luxury. So what they're saying loud and clear is that stop calling us. Stop calling us during the day. Stop trying to sell us and pitch. I hate the word pitch us this, great opportunity you have. Instead, put together something that I can go to in my leisure. And what we found is the biggest buyers come between 5 and 7 p.m., 11 and 12 midnight, and 4 a.m. to 7 a.m. That sounds kind of strange. Most of you are sleeping. I'm usually up, but most of you are sleeping, but that is when they're actually looking. And so they want to be able to look at it. Most of our facilities aren't open then. So they're not going to be able to talk to us. So how can they reach us better? And that is, they have mentioned loud and clear, do you have a premium luxury space that we can go to? A page that will give, what I want to know is, who are the peers? Are any of my peers purchasing from you? What have my peers said? So do you have any testimonials on there? Do you have any comments on there that is business oriented, that yes, we've used it, here's how we've used it, here's why we're using it, that gives them confirmation. Secondly, they want to be able to have the luxury of, a lot of times we'll put stuff out there, but we don't put prices because we want to talk about it. Give us the information, give us one-stop shopping, whether it's a QR code and we go on our phone and we look all this up and it's business only, or a code that I go into to look at to see what you have, but let me examine it on my own. If I have questions, let me be able to text you my questions. Instead of, you have to call me, you have to walk me through all this. Let me text you, answer my questions, get where we're going. Secondly, lastly, can I buy it online? Can I just buy the experience? Can I just click my button and say, yep, this is what I want at 4 a.m. and just buy it now? Why do I have to go through all this where you have to have a person connect with me because it's a luxury area, because it's a premium area? If I'm willing to pay for it, let me buy it. Let me buy it now while I'm at it. Most of them have said loud and clear, during the day, they're busy. They're doing other things. And the way they want to use it is usually different. They like to, we'll get into that later, but how are you using it out of season or out of days, non-game days, as well as in game days? How can I use it differently so that it's more of that unique experience to us and that we feel the luxury from it? So how we're buying it is much more digital than what we're used to or what we feel we should be doing. We have to break the mold and be able to go where they are in their buying habits now.
Inevitably, my husband looks at me at 7 a.m. and says, what the hell did you buy between the hours of 5 and 6:30? So yeah, we are attached to our phones, whether we're sleeping or awake or conscious or not, we're buying in the middle of the night. So I would agree with that. I want to turn to Josh on that note of kind of frictionless and the easy transaction. We have always thought, and a lot of us still do, myself included, that premium is a relationship business. But we are understanding that digital first mindset is what's going to enhance the relationship. It seems kind of counterintuitive, right? Like the digital doesn't help me build a relationship, but at the end of the day, it does, because you're giving it to them the way that they want it. So Josh, what do you say about that?
Yeah, absolutely. And Kathy, just want to say, I love everything that you just shared right there, because when you think about what it is that guests expect from that relationship, we probably don't think of ourselves as competing with businesses like Amazon or Uber or DoorDash. But look at the last couple of years, whether it's pandemic related or not, we are in a much more digital age than we were just a few years ago. The amount of things that we are able to do so easily on our phones at our fingertips has completely reset the expectation for the industries that we are in. And it is because of those disruptors and the leaders in their field that have done that. And we can look at all the disruptors of any industry and look at just how our expectations have changed over the last several decades and, and even beyond. But if we look at it from the technology standpoint, people want to have more agency over their own experience. Kathy, when you said that they're saying stop calling us during the day, stop trying to pitch us, because they want to be able to do a lot more of their research and take a lot more of the transaction into their own hands. In my industry, in the attractions industry, a lot of the venues that we work with are small family entertainment centers, and their core premium product is birthday parties. So bear with me for a second if this seems like it's completely, parallel or not related at all to this. But if you think about just the buying process of that, one of the things that is important right now is, can a guest go and book a birthday party for their child on their phone? A lot of digital natives are parents now and planning these for their children. So if you think about people who grew up immersed in technology as part of their regular daily lives, they don't necessarily want to make that phone call or receive that phone call to talk about if they're going to plan that birthday party for their kid. They want to do it while they're sitting on their couch on Tuesday night, thinking about what it is. And it could be between 11 and midnight, whatever it is, and say, hey, I was able to do this so easily because from a technology standpoint, I was able to get all the information that I needed. I was able to do it on my phone. There wasn't too much clicking. There wasn't too much scrolling. I was able to use my saved payment information with my Apple Pay already. So from a transaction standpoint, it was so much quicker. It was easier. And now it's setting the stage, and now it's setting an even greater expectation, all for the good, to be able to set the stage for a phenomenal experience when the guest arrives at that venue. So what can you do to put more of that into the hands of the guest? That even just from a technology standpoint, is it what type of friction can you remove from the purchase process? Because when you do that, you're going to get more bookings, but you're also going to get more satisfied guests who are going through that process.
Yeah, totally agree. I get a text that says you can buy a Beamer online for $100,000. Why can't you buy a suite online? Well, it does bring up the question: how are we dealing with leased models? And if there's price escalators year to year, you can't necessarily sell all of your premium inventory online, but you can give them the information and turn back control to them to be able to research what it is they want to buy and then have that conversation. So Josh, I think there's a hybrid to that. Make it as frictionless as possible, even if that means at the end of the day, I do have to make a final call. So I think, again, seeming counterintuitive that you're building a relationship, but would you like to respond to that?
Well, yeah, I think what you can do is take all of the administrative, I want to use the word boring, but the functional mechanics of what it is that the employee needs to do to be able to complete that. If you strip all the friction from that, then there's more opportunity for the relationship. Then there's more opportunity to be able to now actually get to know the guest better, build more rapport. There's now more time that's allocated towards creating a more personal connection with that guest, because the administrative elements of it, the functional elements of it, those are already done. Those are already behind us. Those were easy. They were taken care of. And so now it's not just, hey, can I get your credit card number? What's the expiration? What are the 3 numbers on the back? Don't worry about that. What are you visiting for? Is it your birthday? It's a milestone birthday. How many people are you bringing with you? Where are you coming from? Where are all the guests coming in from? Now you're able to build that rapport. Now you're actually getting a lot more intelligence from that guest. And then now maybe after that call, now you can put those wheels in motion to say, all right, what are we going to do for this guest when they get here? What can we do to surprise and delight and create those wow moments that are ultimately going to create that perception that this was a valuable premium experience?
Okay, I am skipping my own order here, but Peter and I talked about this, and you brought up data, collecting data on what the clients want. And we discussed on our practice call that luxury also means privacy in data and real estate. And Peter, I think you and I agree on this, but is there a balance? One of the challenges with suites is that we don't necessarily know who's in our suite night overnight, because it could be the suite buyer who is entertaining 10 of his or her clients, and we just don't know who that is. They want to keep it that way. Where's the balance here? Because we want the data to provide them a better experience, but they don't want the data necessarily to be shared.
So I might be unpopular for saying this, Amanda, but I think that's bunk. I think the only reason that teams want the data of who's in the suite is because they want to try to go sell those people stuff. I don't necessarily see any teams that are using that data to enhance the experience for the actual guests. Now, there may be teams out there, and I'm sure there are lots of them that I have not encountered that are doing that, but I don't think that there are that many teams that are actioning on data in that kind of a way. I think the San Francisco 49ers are probably the most advanced team that I've seen in that space, and they're doing some really, really interesting stuff. But to me, they're a total anomaly of a team that's actually investing and spending on that. And I think, again, back to, the difference between luxury and maybe luxury buyers is largely, and this is another word for scarcity, but separation. And they're willing to pay for separation, right? The sort of complicated relationship that luxury buyers, I think, have with sports is they want to come in and feel like they're a part of everything, right? Like, yay, I'm, doing all the stuff that everybody else is doing and cheering at the same time. But then when I don't want to be in the herd with everybody, I close the door and I have my own bathroom and I have my own food, my own menu, and my own service staff. And so, it vacillates back and forth between those things, but they pay to have both of those choices at hand instantaneously all of the time. And I think that teams have to be very careful that folks in the general market bucket are, I think, pretty accustomed to trading their privacy for some free benefit. Use of an app, we have endless sort of examples of that. And then as you sort of move into premium, there's a little bit more hesitancy around that. It still happens. But then I think when you move into this pure luxury space, those buyers, if you look at other industries, are absolutely protected at all cost, right? Because there's not many of them. They're very, very difficult to reach, right? The reason why Bentley doesn't do TV commercials is because Bentley buyers don't watch TV, right? Like they have a lot of options. They're, I don't know, sailing and at their house in France or, all these other kind of things. They're not sitting on the couch watching TV. And so those kinds of luxury brands understand not only how discerning that buyer is, but the depth of their value as it relates to the totality of their business. And I think, again, this is a little bit of a cautionary flag for teams. If you're really going to go into that space, you do have to come at that buyer in a different way, because I think Josh said it earlier, they're coming into their sports buying experience with, the mindset of what happens when they're at Mercedes or Bentley or buying a Hublot watch or at a Ritz-Carlton. And so walking into a sports team and getting treated like 50% of how they get treated in all the other sort of luxury buying environments that they're in is, I think, a formula for disaster for teams. So this is, again, a little bit of the it's super interesting to think about going into this space and creating it, because it's, amazing in terms of how lucrative it can be, but it also requires a different level of thinking. And again, last thing I'm going to say, probably unpopular, but one of the things we talk to our teams about is you have a 23-year-old, maybe with commission, making $70,000 a year, trying to sell a multi-million-dollar product to somebody who is making 7 figures a year. And there's a really significant disconnect that's not the seller's fault. But teams a lot of times don't want to pay senior sellers who actually understand that space, are a little further along and professionally mature, to close the gap between sort of the difference. Because, when I was 23 years old, I did not understand, people flying around on jets and all of this kind of crazy stuff, because I was never exposed to any of that. So it's very, very difficult. And I think Kathy can probably speak to this because she works so much in this space. How do you coach somebody like that to understand that world so that they can service it from a sales perspective in this kind of concierge way that is expected in all other parts of their life?
Well, we're seeing a lot of hiring from hospitality into sports now. Unfortunately, premium. We lost some folks through COVID and furloughs and whatnot. And you're seeing hiring in the architectural and on the team side from hospitality. So it is the Ritz-Carlton. It is perhaps the Bentleys that are now seeing sports as an entree for, to get into that type of work. I will go back to relating it to other industries because you brought that up, the Ritz-Carltons, Bentleys, et cetera. And I'll go Erica and Simon, kind of a mashup of questions. Like, we have to look at the moments of truth. Like, if they're using those other luxury brands, what is it that that is being delivered upon? And part two of that question is, how then do we deliver that in terms of the design? Literally, like, how are we designing our spaces to provide that? So again, kind of a mashup of a question of my own and from the audience is, how is the hospitality industry influencing the design of luxury and premium? So Simon, Erica, does one of you want to reply to that?
I would like to go first, if that's all right. Sorry, Simon, jumped in there. As we were talking, it's always come down to sort of three. It's really, it could be 100 different points, but looking at it, I think I always look at the hospitality industry. Peter has sort of turned me on to the luxury car industry, honestly, because it's never been a world that I've been aware of, but it's been interesting to look into that. He mentioned Hublot watches. I think fashion, all of these different industries are good to look at. But at the end of the day, we've touched on a lot of it. I think it's ease of use, it's choice, and it's a bespoke experience. And each one of these things will be different depending on the location. What we did in Miami at Hard Rock Stadium when we were looking at renovating that stadium to different levels of premium and luxury experience is different than, say, we would do here in Kansas City, where I live, because expectations are a little bit different. The culture is different. But I think architecturally, as we're looking at these things and we look at, say, the hospitality industry, hotel industry, when I say ease of use, we've obviously talked about purchase. That's sort of a given, because to your point, you can purchase a $500,000 car or a $50,000 plus watch, or a $20 million home to a $300,000 home. I mean, it's all about scale, and we can argue the idea of premium versus luxury. But I think also, Peter touched on it a little bit, is premium and luxury have also been associated with location in these venues that we're talking about. And he mentioned access, like having your feet on the court. But I also think we need to think about it from the very, very beginning. Obviously, there are higher end spaces where you have a luxury buyer who has a closer, easier access parking space. But then what happens to get them from the door of their car to their space? Privacy being a big one. There's been times that we've designed kind of these in and out, not being sort of lumped in with the general buyer. I think we need to think about even not just the space that they will end up with, but also just how they get there and the experience there. You know, it's the privacy, it's the ease of use, and it's the luxury environment of just, whether it's an elevator or corridor, whatever it may be, getting back and forth to their space. But I think it's also, when we're talking about these spaces and we're talking about choice, the idea of stratification. You know, Josh had mentioned the example of the different hotel chains. That's absolutely right, because I think a lot of times, and you know, I'm going to throw this sort of to the design industry. There's a lot of times that you see, whether it's new venues or renovated venues, where I'm going to say you're paying a premium. I'm not going to necessarily say they are premium spaces. You're paying a premium to sit in club A, B, or C. And maybe each one is a little bit of a different price and a higher price, but I think a lot of times the venues, the teams, whether it's the team itself or the design team, are almost cannibalizing. And so the idea of stratification in terms of levels of luxury, it's the Peter example of, should club A be all inclusive? And it was immediately no. But it's beyond that, right? It's
Erica, it looks like you hit mute.
Sorry about that. It's the choice. It's almost the equivalent of choosing the penthouse suite to the standard suite. You know, there needs to be a difference. And so architecturally, we need to make sure that each has its own visual identity. It has its own service identity. It has its own just expectations to be met by that premium versus luxury buyer. And then the idea of the bespoke experience, I think it ties into that. You know, it's down to, if we're looking at a luxury car industry, there's a difference between my faux hand-stitched leather dashboard versus an actual hand-stitched high-end leather dashboard. I think it's even down to the sort of the tactile things. And if we're talking about technology being seamless and the idea of how that could play into it, even the idea, and Peter had mentioned it, kind of that idea of the privacy, but I think it's allowing these spaces to be private as needed, but still part of that social experience, ties into just the idea of, especially the new premium buyer, is social awareness, and it's being conscious of that. And so I think the spaces are going to be regional as to how they approach it, but architecturally, it needs to respond to all of those things from door to door, literally.
Literally, door to door. Yeah, I do want to call. We are 5 minutes over the hour right now, and that's okay. I think it's a really interesting discussion, but just based on me tracking the number of attendees who have had to jump, you know, a handful have. We will keep this going for another 5 to 10 and give each person kind of some parting words, whether it's other industries that we should be looking at, whether it's how technology can enhance things, whether it's the levels of premium, / luxury. Whatever it is, I'd love to hear kind of closing thoughts from each person. And I'm going to start with Kathy, because you were called out a couple times in the most recent comments. So Kathy, starting with you, what would you like our listeners today to understand about differentiating the premium experience, in your opinion? Did Kathy leave us? You're on mute.
That helped. I think it would be really good for us to stop looking in the rearview mirror and really start looking ahead more. And that's something sports needs to do as a whole. But I also think it would be great if everybody could go to Tiffany's down in New York and go through all their areas. I went there and of course I asked for their bargain basement, and they actually have one. It's on the 3rd floor, but it's not a basement. But I asked them to go take me through their buying experience. And this ties in everything that everybody's been saying as to how you purchase. When you start selling, you start in their quote bargain basement. These are, you won't find anything under $100, but it's that more common person that thinks they're getting, to them, it's a premium experience. From there, it goes to your main floor, which is more upscale premium. And, those that are lucky to afford those things can purchase those. And then it goes to their private floor, and that's the luxury. And when you go to that floor, you're one-on-one, and it's brought to you in velvet, and it's opened on this big pedestal, this crystal, and it's that unique experience that you get that it's definitely luxury. It's what other people downstairs or in the bargain basement are not going to get. So sports has to start looking at it the same way as to what are we offering that's bargain basement, what are we offering that's more upscale, and what are we offering that's really luxury and unique, and what the buyer wants that other people aren't going to have, that's going to be really special to them. How can we present that?
It's sprinkles, whipped cream, Bentley, right? Simon, on that note, let's go to you. I would love it if you could touch on moments of truth. I won't put your feet to the fire, but whatever you think is going to be most impactful here, Simon, take us.
Yeah, certainly. Well, there's a couple of points that were quite interesting. As Kathy said, that the industry is attracting or certainly inviting or getting more hospitality folk coming into the space. And when we think of, I guess when we immediately think of the hospitality group, if you say, who are they? They might be from the Ritz-Carlton or anywhere else that have been able to position themselves, and us all accept the fact that they are this. They know how to make people feel welcome, and they know how to care for people beyond just giving them what they need. And then tying to Erica's point there about development and design, yes, the relationship that they have with the team is from the time they pick up the telephone till the time they turn off the telephone at night after reading the final box score. That is their relationship for the day with the brand, and then it carries on to every time that they see the brand or hear it on ad or something else. And they call those moments of truth, and those are touch points that we have with a customer. And again, going back to Erica's point about, gosh, we think of what's going on in the suite, we forget that they've taken an hour to get there from wherever it is they parked their car. And that's one of the big challenges, is that when we think of going to a hotel, we know that all of the touch points within it are under the aegis of that hotel's brand name and mission statement and employees. But when we go to a game that Saturday or that Sunday, our relationship is with the team. Yeah, we went and had a great time at the Seahawks. But the problem is we've got all of these other players who are involved in the touch points during the day. We've got the valet parking the car and handling the parking space. We've got the concession company, the catering company that's handling the F&B if we're going out and mixing with the at the concession stand or having food brought into our suite. We've got the janitorial service that's looking after the facilities while we're there. Hey, that restroom was not very clean, or it was clean. And then the ticket vendor, and as Josh points out, the beauty of having a seamless ticket app or ticketing app or whatever else we might use with that technology. When any of those points don't work, when the restrooms aren't clean, darn it, this app keeps canceling me out. The guy scratched my car, the food wasn't very hot, whatever it is. The challenge is all of those elements are being handled and overseen by different companies and different groups. Yet, if there's a problem, good or bad, it still comes back to, hey, the relationship is with the team, and boy, they didn't look after me very well today. Or wow, that was such a great experience. I can't wait to go back next week, and I'm going to tell my friends and get them to go as well, which is ultimately what we want.
Thank you. Really appreciate that. Josh.
Yeah. We've talked a lot about the buying persona and the luxury buyer and the premium buyer. And while that most likely is the core demographic, what I would say is not to neglect or not to forget about the value consumer who is looking for a premium or luxury experience. Many years ago, I was a VIP tour guide at Universal Studios in Orlando. And when I first got that job and started the training, I thought that my job would just be escorting celebrities around the park all day, every single day. And I found that that was actually very rare. The majority of guests who I had on my tours were regular people doing something extraordinary. And they knew that this was their one shot to be able to maximize the benefit of their visit. And they saw that for them, that the price of the tour was going to determine the value. And I've done a lot of research on this and have found that people who often complain that prices are too expensive or say it's not worth it are the people who bought the most basic price, therefore spent the least. And the flip side of that is that those who praise the value of an experience are oftentimes those who spent the most and ultimately got the most value from that. So people are willing to pay a premium price provided you deliver that premium value. And I think that transcends all demographics and income levels, at least for the most part, in terms of the guests that we are serving. So I'll tie that into something that I said at the end of, I did a webinar or a virtual workshop a little over a year ago about just kind of the new guest experience. This was going into 2021. So obviously a different point in the pandemic then. And I ended that workshop by really tying it into what it was that our industry, that all of our industries had been through the previous year and now the previous 2 years, and particularly that the term non-essential boiled my blood the first time that I heard it in terms of non-essential businesses, non-essential, industries, because what we're doing is, of course, creating meaningful impacts in people's lives. And what I said was, it's not that our industry is non-essential, it's that it's a luxury. And that applies to the most premium experiences that guests can have. And it applies to the most basic. So any guest who's coming through your turnstile, coming into your venue, coming into your gates is worth celebrating in any aspect. If they're buying the most basic, if they're buying the most premium, that we want to make sure we're celebrating every single guest. So I'll end with that.
I love the word celebrate. Thank you. Erica, second to last.
Well, I've really enjoyed this discussion, and I think it brings to light the obvious answer is that there is no answer. There's no clear cut and dry one way or the other, because I think we could go on for hours about differentiating premium to luxury. But from an architectural standpoint, I would say we as designers just have the responsibility to be nimble and to help guide our clients. Understanding revenue is a big part of our job that I think as an industry could be better at. I know that I personally, our group really strives to understand that, because I think understanding the revenue goals of a team along with the pricing strategies really can help us as designers determine what is the best spend to react to each specific location and needs for what that premium versus general versus luxury buyer is. And so just keeping in mind that the way we've been designing needs to evolve. I mean, we've already touched on this with technology where it is now. That's one thing. We know how quickly it changes, but where it's going to be in another 5, 10, 20 years, who knows? It's exponentially growing, but technology is being such a small piece. Just the social awareness that continues to evolve, and we need to consider that when we're considering spaces and how our guests interact with those spaces, and remembering that it's not just when you're at your seat what that experience is. It really is from the time you buy the ticket to the time that you order on your app, to the time that you leave. Just what can we do to help differentiate, whether you call it premium or luxury or even general, just how to physically show that difference. It's a challenge that there's no one right answer, because again, it's going to be dependent on location and really what the overall desires are. So it's an exciting discussion to have. And I think it's an exciting challenge as a designer to just keep working on and thinking of new ideas and how we can keep being flexible and nimble in our spaces.
In order to do that, you have to, and I'll call BS on future proofing, but being flexible is definitely a thing. And it's buying, you don't sell a seat, you sell access. It's luxury is access to things, not necessarily the seat, because you can't change the seat year over year. You can't just renovate or build a new building year over year. So being nimble is a conceptual thing as well. Peter, get your valet ticket, get your car, and drive us home, buddy.
Thank you. This has been great, and thanks to everybody for what they've added to the conversation. It's definitely given me some things to think about too. As you know, I think Eric is right. I don't know that there's a one-shot silver bullet way to come at this, but my parting thoughts to the group and to the audience would be a little bit of math. At least the clients we work with, 10 to 12% of their seats represent 35 to 42% of their total ticket revenue. And most of at least new buildings are selling that premium or luxury inventory on term, which means it also provides the most revenue certainty in the business. So when you're thinking about how much should I be thinking about this, how much time and energy should I really be kind of contemplating, the business case to me is really, really simple. I'm not really sure teams actually spend enough time thinking about what we're talking about today. And to your point, I guess, trying to future-proof this, because it's not really about future-proofing luxury or premium. It's that those two categories, and however you choose to define them, are really what's going to either keep the business afloat or be sort of the best chance at the business growing. That's not to say, because I'm right there with Josh, we're doing this for everybody, and we don't want to sort of forget the other, 90% or 80% of the seats in the house. But when you just break the math down, I would encourage people in the industry to think like product managers. And I think, when you're outside of sports working in other industries, and we brought up automotive, and I'm a gearhead, I'm a nerd that way, but I think the car business has done a really, really good job in terms of how they build their product arrays and how there's interconnectivity and cascading sort of benefit up and down their product lines, right? And all of that drives a tremendous amount of loyalty around those brands. And there's lots of great research that people can find that's, out there online if they want to read about this kind of stuff, or you can ping me, or ping Amanda and she can share my information and I'll put you on to some stuff. But there's lots of industries that use sort of this very product centric and product arrayed management philosophy to drive business. And, that is to say there's a top of the line, right? At Audi, it's the R8. And at the bottom of the line at Audi, it's the A3. I think there's an A2 now, right? And there's a lot of different things that sort of fall in between that, but there's also an escalator to move people like we've talked about. And not everyone's going to move from A2 to R8, but they may move from A2 to A6 over the course of their life. And if they're sort of spending in that entire time with us, then that's what's really going to keep these businesses solvent and providing growth. So I'll stop with that, but I really appreciate being invited to be a part of this, and certainly with this esteemed group of thinkers.
I couldn't have said it better myself. And all of these thinkers are available, I believe, on LinkedIn. So if you want more information from any one of them, hit them up or certainly connect with me, and I'll see if I can get you connected to any one of these 5 brilliant folks. So thank you all for joining us. Thank you to our panel here today. And again, if you have other questions or topics you'd like to hear at the ALSD conference, my email address is amanda@alsd.com. Thank you guys so much. And yes, Johnny, to answer your question, a recording will be available very soon on alsd.com. Thanks so much, everyone. See y'all soon.